Nigeria may have just changed the business case for solar, but not in the way many people think. If you run a factory, hotel, hospital, schools, estate, or any business with serial power bill, this concerns you. Now, here's the simple issue. Today, if your solar system produces power when nobody is using it, maybe your factory is short for the weekend or your building's load is low, that excess power is mostly wasted. Next net billing regulation 2026 may have just changed that. But before anyone gets too excited, there is a catch, and it is very important. Now, in this video, I would explain who qualifies, how the money side works, why this is not the same thing as net metering, and the risk nobody should ignore before investing. First, let's be clear on what is stated in the regulation. On June 3rd, 2026, NERC, the regulator, announced the start of the net billing regime. The regulation was made pursuant to the Electricity Act 2023, and it allows eligible customers who are consuming and producing electricity, now called prosumers, to generate renewable power, mainly solar, for their own use and send any excess power back to the DISCO's network. But pause a moment. This is not for every rooftop solar user. It applies to systems from 50 kilowatt peak to 1.5 megawatt peak. That means it is mainly for factories, hotels, hospitals, schools, estates, and large institutions. If you have a small home solar system, this is probably not for you yet. And you cannot just connect your system and start exporting power. There is a process. Apply first to your DISCO for a technical feasibility assessment. And you get approved, then execute a formal net billing agreement. Next step is to register with the regulator. Your DISCO then installs a revenue grade bi-directional meter measuring exactly what you import and what you've exported with time of use capability. Now, once you are connected, your monthly bill should show what you've imported, what you've exported, the import tariff, the export tariff, your charges, your credits, and any balance carried forward. If you do not use all your export credits in 1 month, you can roll over to the next billing cycle. Now, let's talk about the distinction between net billing and net metering. This distinction is important and it boils down to the money. Many people may get it wrong here, so let's make the difference very simple. Net metering is a simpler and more generous model. If you export 10 units during the day and import 10 units at night, the meter cancels it out. That is 1 for 1. Net billing is different. This is the approach Nigeria has chosen. You buy electricity from your DISCO at the normal retail tariff. But when you export excess power, you are credited at a different export tariff that is usually lower than what you pay when you buy power from the grid. So why did Nigeria choose net billing instead of full net metering? The simple answer is DISCO's revenue assurance. Nigerian DISCOs already have serious collection and other loss problems. If large customers could wipe out their bills 1 for 1, that would put more pressure on DISCO's finances. Net billing is a more cautious compromise for the sustainability of the entire system. So think of this as a cost management tool, not a money-making machine. Your factory roof is not suddenly a power trading business. Now, let's look at how this compares across some African countries. Nigeria is not starting from ground zero. Other African countries have tried different versions, and there are 3 quick lessons. Kenya, for example, gives us the first lesson. Net metering can be more generous, but it usually comes with tight limits. Kenya allows credit, but it also puts a cap on who can participate and how much capacity can come into the system. Egypt gives us lesson number 2. Policy can change. Egypt has used net metering for years, but there has also been pushback around compensation. So a good policy today can also change tomorrow. And then in South Africa, where we go for lesson number 3, implementation depends, of course, on the utility. There's a national framework which is important, but what happens on ground can differ from ESCOM down to the municipalities. And that is likely where Nigeria is heading. NERC accept the national framework and the state regulators may adopt same or tweak a bit, but each DISCO will have to handle the real work from feasibility assessment, meters, approvals, and billing. So your implementation experience with a co-DISCO or a Ikeja Electric, for example, may not be the same as someone with Abuja or any other DISCO. So what does this all mean for the markets? For solar developers and EPC companies, this is very important. Nigeria now has a formal legal path for grid-connected distributed generation at this scale. That means commercial and industrial solar projects can be planned with a clearer regulatory framework, not just self consumption behind the meter. Now, for the grid, it also helps. If more businesses generate some of their own power, pressure on the weak distribution feeders can of course, reduce. This can also reduce diesel petrol use, which helps, of course, with emissions. For discos, this is not yet a major threat. It is more like a controlled test. The entry point is very high for now, and the rollout will likely be gradual. But discos now have new responsibilities to carry out feasibility studies, provide bidirectional metering, safety checks, and billing systems that can track import, export, and credit. That is the real operational work. Now, let's go into some of the risks that nobody is talking about before we get too excited. Risk number one would be feeder capacity that can be limited. There's a 30% aggregate feeder cap on electricity that can be exported to the grid. Your disco's line can only take a certain amount of power flowing back into it. If several factories or estates on the same feeder apply before you, the disco may tell you the line is full, there's no capacity, or they may reduce how much you can export. So if this matters to your business, then you have to speak to your disco as quickly as possible. Risk number two, the export tariff can change. Egypt shows us that compensation rules can shift. So do not build your whole investment case on export income. Build it mainly on what you save by using your own solar power. Treat export credit as extra upside. And number three, technical compliance, of course, is very serious. Anti-islanding protection, inverter standard, and synchronization are not just paperwork. If your system sends power into a line that workers still think is dead, that is a safety risk. Use a proper certified installer, not just the cheapest quotes that you get. And for number four, financing may not be unlocked based on export tariffs alone. Banks like certainty. Lenders will be cautious about projects that depend heavily on export revenue and will look more on a business cash flow to make a lending decision. That's for those who are looking to raise capital and to invest in a project like this. And for number five, there's also the transfer risk when ownership or occupancy changes. Any change will require a formal transfer of the net billing agreement and is subject to DISCO approval. The transfer will not be permitted if the incoming party intends to change or reconfigure the solar system capacity, as this is a trigger for fresh approval process. Accumulated credit will also be forfeited if the system is relocated. And for risk number six, DISCO implementation here is very critical. The NERC has created the rules, but the DISCOs, of course, still needs to implement. They need to process applications, install meters, update billing systems. Early applicants should plan robust engagement with the DISCOs until implementation and pick up speed. Now, let's make this further practical for every stakeholder. If you own or run a factory, this regulation is aimed at you. If you already use solar or you are considering reducing diesel costs, this may help you get value from power you are not using, especially on weekends or low production days. But you have to move early. Feeder capacity is limited, and then you have to build your numbers around savings first, not because of export income. Now, if you run a hotel, hospital, school, or large estate, the same opportunity applies, but your load profile is very critical. Some people use power all day and all night, so you may not have as much access to export. You have to run your numbers properly before sizing your system. If you're a homeowner with a small rooftop system, this is probably not for you yet. The 50 kilowatt minimum puts most homes outside the scheme. So do not let anyone sell you net billion income for a small residential system today. Now, for a disco, this is now an operational issue. The discos will need to do feeder capacity studies, metering plans, safety checks, billing updates, and clear customer engagement process. The discos that communicate clearly, of course, will win the customer's trust early as well. For solar developers or financiers, there's a real opportunity in the 50 kilowatts to 1.5 megawatts kilowatt band. But advise clients pragmatically. Focus on self-consumption savings first. Treat export value as a credit towards self-consumption. And to close, here's the honest bottom line. Next net billing regulation 2026 is a big step. It gives prosumers legal recognition, opens a path for distributed generation, and gives commercial solar a clearer regulatory pathway. But beyond the headlines, export tariffs will be one to watch out for. Also, feeder capacity is not unlimited, and for now, this is mainly for businesses and institutions, not households, unless you have a very large excess capacity at home meeting the threshold. So, if this applies to you, move early ask the right questions, and build your business case on savings first. The real question is not just whether net billing is good or whether it is bad. The real question is whether Nigeria can implement it properly with fair tariffs, working meters, clear disco processes, and customers who understand the limits. What do you think? Is net billing the right model for Nigeria, or should we be pushing for something closer to Kenya's net metering? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if this helped you understand the issue clearly, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.